Hi there, welcome to OrthoHub Stories. It's a new feature we're doing on OrthoHub, and today I've got Deborah Eastwood. Deborah, thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure, of course.
Now, what did you have for breakfast today?
I had chocolate and coffee, thanks,
Chocolate
Peter.
and coffee, oh man, that's a bad start.
I know it's a bad start, but it's got me here today, so it's all right.
Deborah Eastwood is a big deal, and I'm going to have to read this because otherwise I'll mess it up. Deborah Margaret Eastwood, FRCS Orth, consultant paediatric orthopedic surgeon at Great Ormond Street and of course RNOH Stanmore, associate professor of University College London, associate professor of multiple different places, a visiting professor rather, multiple different places, past president of EPOS, European Pediatric Orthopedic Society, editor of JTO, Journal of Trauma and Orthopaedics, Council of Management, BJJ Publishing House, publishing a frankly profligate volume of peer-reviewed journals, articles, Vice President-elect for the BOA, and widely regarded, and I'm not just saying this, widely regarded and thought across the board as a thoroughly good egg. Deborah, again, thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure, Pete.
So, where should we start? Let's start with when you were a kid, where you grew up and what it was like.
I grew up in the Northwest, so I'm a Lancashire/Cheshire lass. I thought my dad did a really exciting job called export manager, but really he was just a salesman when I think back on it. But he travelled a lot abroad. We moved abroad with him, so we lived in different places in Europe and South America as growing up.
So where were the coolest, where are the places you sort of remember as a kid as being like sort of just startlingly different?
Well, it would have to be South America. So we lived in Colombia, in Envigado, which was the drug capital of the world, you know, one of the little villages just outside
Did you learn a bit of Spanish
Medellin.
while you were there?
I did. I was fluent, but I'm not anymore, sadly.
Right.
But I was.
And so how long would you spend in each place?
I suppose we were in South America for just 2 years. Early on in my life, I was in Austria for a few years up till about the age of 6. And then latterly, my parents lived in Poland, but I was at university by then, so not too much travelling after that.
Right. And what did a weekend as a kid like? What did it look like for you? Were they into like visiting castles and monuments and things, or were they stay-at-homey kind of people, or what did you do?
That's yeah. Well, there was myself and my sister, so we were sometimes good friends and sometimes bitter enemies, of course.
Yeah.
And she had the horse that took her out of my hair for quite a while of the day.
Were you envious of the horse?
No, that's fine. No, I was not into the horses.
She can keep her horse.
She's a vet now and I'm a doctor, so that probably, we sorted it out fairly early on. No, I was into my sports, so I was second reserve for every team going. So whenever they were short of someone, they rang me, and I, like a fool, ran down and filled in whatever.
Right. So you were one of these, like I guess you were tall at school, and you were sporty and athletic, and you were one of the girls that all the others wanted to be like.
No. I was the shy kid at the back who really didn't feel part of the group, but I was keen on sports and I wanted to be included, and my mother taught at the school, so on a Friday evening when the games mistress came in and said to my mum, we're going to be short in the netball team or we're going to be short in the hockey team, will Deborah turn up? And mum said, yep, she will.
Okay.
Because she knew I would, but so no, I wouldn't say I was really the be-all and end-all.
Okay, so you were a bit shy, if anything.
Yeah.
And what was your favourite sport?
I liked swimming and I liked hockey. Yeah.
Because now you're into cricket, aren't you?
Yeah, I like my cricket.
So just explain to me what's going on there. What is it you like about cricket? Is it kind of the social side, or is it the sitting there for 5 days waiting for a draw?
I think the long game is fascinating, and playing anything for a longer game, to find what your end point, I think is interesting and exciting, and watching how tactics develop and the best laid plans go wrong because it starts raining, and
that's right, and those on-field decisions which
So I think this is getting a bit pseudo deep, but those are the sorts of things that we have to do in everyday life as well, sort of plan things. But no, it's entirely the social side as well, sitting there, fair weather of course, in the sunshine with your mates and a beverage or two.
Enjoying the cricket. It is a wonderful way to spend time.
I think so, yes.
So, why medical school?
I think around the age of, well, I know, around the age of 14, I had a schoolgirl crush on the girl who was most popular and brightest and best at sport and best at everything. So I had a bit of a crush on her. So I asked her what she wanted to do when she grew up. And so she said medicine. So I said medicine too, which was frankly worrying for my parents because I wasn't good with sick people and I certainly didn't like the sight of blood. So I think they were right to be worried that I went to medical school on that basis. And what's more, I went to a different medical school from my best friend, so that didn't work out too well either. So it wasn't the way the medical students of today choose to go, but it worked out fine.
And were you sciencey? Did it paid into your strengths?
Yeah, I was sciencey. As I say, I wasn't a skilled communicator at that side, at that age, and certainly I wasn't on the artistic side, so really it had to be something scientific-y.
What were the other options on the table? What do you think your parents were kind of gunning for?
I don't think they minded me going into the medical profession, but in fact, I'm sure they didn't. I think they just were surprised that that's what...
That was the choice you made.
Yeah, but they've been very supportive all my career in discussing what I wanted to do and discussing it and then sort of allowing me to make my own decisions.
Yeah. And it was the same for your sister, was it? She's older or younger?
Younger,
right.
Yeah, so my parents were worried that she wanted to be a doctor too, but didn't want to do the same as me. I only found that out later and I thought, no, you just need to look at us. We're similar, but really quite different. So.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so because that was a bit like me with my brother. He was really into sailing, and I thought, oh God, just because the fact that he liked it meant that I was not allowed to like it. Looking back now, I would have loved to learn how to sail, but I could not abide the concept of doing something that he liked.
Exactly. So I don't think it wasn't quite that bad with Jane and I, but I mean, yes.
Yeah, but it is funny. The decision-making process that brings you to where you are now sometimes, isn't it?
Yes. So I'm a great believer in serendipity, and I think that the rigid structures that are in place at the moment, you've got to tick this box, and you've got to play this game, and you've got to play by the rules. But all the time, I think we like to bend or break the rules or circumvent them, and those are the sorts of people I want to work with or encourage.
Yeah.
So I think we have to have a mix of both, really.
Yeah. Where did you go to medical school?
So I went to Birmingham, centre of the universe, I was told at the time. And it was a bit of a shock to the system. I've never been away from home before. As I say, I was a little bit of a retiring wallflowery type person at the stage. But I soon got into the swing of university life. I learnt quite quickly to like coffee, which I hadn't before, and curries, which I hadn't before, and fizzy drinks, of which, beer was one of those fizzy drinks. So I learnt quite quickly.
Were you ever made to drink a yard of ale?
No, I declined that.
You declined it. It was offered.
Yes. Later on, when I was more part of the gang, then those sorts of challenges came up. So I was renowned at one stage for propping up the med school bar, either on, the serving side or on the drinking side. But
that came later.
Yeah, it came later, thanks. Yeah, it took a while to get into that.
When you look at medical students now and you meet them on the ward rounds and you meet them on the wards, how do you feel they're different now?
It would be easy to say that they're more focused, more dedicated, because that's the ones I see, and that they're maybe having less fun than we had at medical school. But that's because I'm not really part of their lives. So I see, and I'm quite senior now, so what I see is perhaps what they choose to show me about themselves. I think they are very dedicated. I think they're very keen to learn. But I find it sad to see that they seem to think most of their learning can be done online or remotely or virtually, whereas I would like them to be much more involved in our clinical workload. But then, I'm talking from two hospitals which don't really like undergraduate students, so they try and pretend that they're postgraduate institutions. Right. So I may not have a full flavour of what the students are all about.
Is it just me, or are medical students cleverer than we were?
I think you're right. I think they've had to jump through more hurdles or different hurdles in a different way. And yes, I think they've had to read more, write more, do more, learn more. I don't know how to describe it, but I get the feeling that they're brighter than
it's a brighter cohort than we went through. Yeah. And because after I'd been a doctor for a few years, I was quite strongly of the opinion that you didn't have to be particularly clever to be a doctor. You didn't have to have a super high IQ. I kind of based that on the fact that I didn't and I was.
Yeah.
So, but is is that true? Do you think doctoring has become more complex and therefore actually you do need a high level of intelligence to cope these days because there's more facts coming at you?
I actually think the reverse. It's easier to find the facts. I don't have to grovel in the library on the, look in the bottom shelf of Index Medicus to try and find an article that I can then read to learn something. The knowledge is all available to you. So you do need to be bright and intelligent and sparky to sort of pick out the salient points from all the information that's available to you. But I don't think that, I think you do not have to be exceptionally bright to be a good doctor. Yeah. And I know it's not fashionable to say that that's all you want to be, but I think that's what we want. We want good doctors. Yeah. And you will develop the skills that will make you a good doctor. And you can look up the facts that 1 in 1,000 people get this reaction to that. You just need to be aware that they could have a reaction or they could have a complication.
Yeah. What turned you on to orthopaedics? Why did you end up there?
I think as a houseman, I'm incredibly indebted to the Prof of General Surgery, colorectal surgery actually, who got me interested in surgery and explained to me that it would be feasible to have that sort of a career. But then when I got into trauma, of course, so I came into T&O via trauma, really, and fixing things. And 1 minute you're okay, then you're broken, and then we can fix it, and then you'll be better. And the team I worked with used to go for coffee regularly. We'd go to the pub after the working day, and there was a great camaraderie and teamwork. So I think it was the patients, the work, and the colleagues that sold it to me. So I think it was a bit of everything in those early days.
But which were the aspects of orthopaedics that really sang to you? Once you kind of made up your mind, yeah. Which were the bits you really got on with?
I think, again, making people better. I think there's nothing more rewarding than doing a hip replacement or fixing a fracture, in that you are restoring function and quality of life to someone. And I think that's really important. And I think it's quite immediate in yes. trauma and orthopaedics. And so therefore, not only is it fulfilling for the patient, but sadly, it's also fulfilling for yeah. me to see things get better. Or not. If you've, things don't always go right. I do appreciate that. So that's what I liked about orthopaedics. And then into pediatric orthopedics, I liked working with what nature had to offer, rather than taking out your degenerate hip and putting in plastic and cement or metal or whatever yeah. it is we're doing these days. So I preferred to work with what nature had to offer, try and work out what wasn't working and why, and when I should try and influence that. So that's been the challenge that's kept me going. I call it guiding growth. So guiding the growth of the surgeon and the patient in trying to decide what to do.
Tell me about your time as a junior doctor. What was it like?
So the first word I would say was fun. It was fun. It was extremely busy and really tiring, but it was fun. And there was the mess, and you worked with a cohort of your colleagues from medical school, and you work very closely with the teams, the surgical medical teams throughout the hospital. And because you were part of a team structure, which, as you know, I value very highly, it was fun. You were all in it together, and you worked hard and then either slept or played hard when you had time off. Not something that could have gone on forever, but for those periods. And you learnt quick.
Yeah. Quick. And you were super exposed. What's the rota were you running?
A 1 in 2 to 1 in 3. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And because nowadays that would be unthinkable, yeah. wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Did you ever feel overworked, overpressured? Did you ever feel this is all too much? I've just got to. I can't bear this.
Yes, I'm sure we did, and I know that some people felt that more than myself. Maybe that I just hid it or repressed it or whatever the phrase is, but I don't think I did. I think we were in it together, so that when one of us was down, we knew about it, and you either helped out, or you sympathised, or you empathised, or you took them out for a drink, or you gave them a chocolate biscuit, or whatever you needed to do, or chatted to them, and you were there for them. So that I think that although we've all felt stress from time to time, we seemed to manage it well at that time.
Yeah.
That's, me looking back in hindsight, and maybe at the time it wasn't.
But you feel that the strength of the team was very much what enabled people to work that hard.
Yeah. So the people who were having a harder time were those who couldn't chat to them. So at houseman level or FY1 level, the people who were having a harder time amongst my colleagues were those who weren't able to chat to their registrars or their consultants. so much, and so therefore their peer support was definitely their colleagues at houseman level.
And I guess that kind of system very much very much favours someone like you who's been in hockey teams, understands what teamwork is, and totally fits in with that vibe. But that's not everyone, is it? Some people don't feel particularly comfortable, all chatting in a big group, the sort of more introvert sides. So do you think did you see people like that getting not injured, but really suffering under that kind of pressure?
I think. So, of course, like everything in life, if you don't see it, you don't recognise it. So they weren't there. They maybe weren't in the bar, in the mess with us when we were all there. So maybe they were hiding somewhere, crying into their coffee or something like that. But so I think that is true. But equally, we were all very aware that it was a team, even if they weren't quite in your team. And you did look out for each other, even the ones who weren't sort of
a bit more peripheral.
Yeah. But you're right. Those people who are on the outside are vulnerable, and I can't look into my heart and feel that I was as kind maybe to all of those people I've met along the way as I should have been.
Yeah, because burnout is a commonly used term now, but it never used to be, right? And we talk about resilience now, but we never used to. The terms just hadn't been used that much. But do you feel that burnout is a more common thing now? And if so, is that related to the more fragmented team structure, the less boundaries defined team where everyone gets wrapped up in a sort of familial setup?
So I feel ill-equipped to comment. I haven't done the homework in reading all the books. I'm not up to date on all the definitions and the things. So I do want to qualify my answers with that. But do I think that that burnout and stress is more common? I think it is, because the pressures on us are absolutely never-ending. You cannot walk away from work or a hassling email. It will follow you. And, we're all aware that there could be a whole load of fuss piling up on our phones while we're chatting. I come from the era where there were no mobile phones. Can you believe it? You had to arrange which pub you were going to be there, and you had to be there. You had to arrange what time you're going to be on the ward round for the ward round and be there. So I think that the never-ending bombardment of stuff also is contributing to the burnout and the stress that we feel.
Right, the inability to escape. Yeah. And how do you escape that?
I think with difficulty, but trying to remember that you will never clear your desk. You will never be on top of all your emails. There will never be an opportunity where you can sit back and say, that's
I've got
done.
nothing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And so I did long ago realised that was going to be an impossible dream. But, and I think that's hard, because if you believe that medicine probably has more than its fair share of type A personalities in it, or whatever they're called these days. But yes, we all expect to be able to deliver, to be on top of the situation. And I think it's hard to accept that we don't need to be on top of that email trail. And we need to also, the resilience is partly saying I can step away from this and I can devote time to other things in my life. And in fact, I should. And I'll be a better person. For that.
Do you feel like junior doctors nowadays get much less exposure to their boss? I know that's a loaded question, because I feel they do. And I sometimes think that we're less able to mentor our juniors because we just don't have that much access to them, or they're in a much wider team, so it's harder to know who's your SHO, because sometimes this week it is, but next week it's not. How do you feel about that?
I think it's true. I do not know my juniors now as well as I used to do. Now that's a two-way thing. Maybe they are not around as much. Maybe I'm too busy. Maybe I'm not as interested. I hope it's not the latter thing. But, with all my other commitments now, I've become one of those bosses I never thought I'd be. I come in to do my job and then I go out again, and I may have disappeared halfway through for a quick Zoom call or something else. And I don't particularly like the person that I've become. Since we chatted the other week, I've been reflecting on that, and I think that's not really what I wanted to be.
Talk about surgical training. You were Totty, Trainer of the Year, runner-up in 2016, and that's a great achievement, and it's that's an awesome national Trainer of the Year. What makes a good trainer?
Yeah, so that is one of the things I am most proud of, actually. I mean, to be recognised, and of course, because it was the national one, that meant that my reach was outside
Right.
of the few trainees that I felt came under my wing during that year. So I would get back to be the time you spend time, and you're approachable, and you're available. So I think those are 2 or 3 of the most things, and then I think that you're prepared, certainly at the senior level, which is where I do most of my training now, that you're allowed, empower them to just manage the patients a little on their own, knowing that I'm just there. But it's the clinical judgment and the management skills, as well as the surgical skills, that I think we have to teach, particularly in my line of work. I think there's a lot of judgment and management that we need to.
Tell me about, are we better at training nowadays than we used to be?
I'd like to say yes without any qualification, but I'm not so sure that's true. I think the old style apprenticeship where, again, a lot of experience with the same team, I think that really empowered you bit by bit to do more and more and take more and more responsibility. Now, I don't have that much contact with some of the members of my team. They do tend to come in and want to do the operation, and there's more to it than that. I have less time, or we make less time, to really go over each operation in real preoperative planning or even decision-making, indications, all the stuff that goes around. So I think those bits have gone in some situations. I know other people are really good at their preoperative planning. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm, again, too busy, too ancient, and that bit's gone. So I think that some aspects are better. They can read up about it a lot, but they need to actually plan what they want to do and then be allowed to do it. So I think some things are better and some things are worse.
Deborah, tell me what makes a good educator. Because you are a good educator. Everyone loves you, and you are someone who has always waved the banner for education. What is it that makes a good one?
I think it's the same tenets that sort of bring up in every aspect of my career. So you've got to be available and affable and engaged with the trainees and allow them their headroom. So if you want to educate someone about a certain condition, you've got to involve them and make them understand about the condition and why you're picking. They've got to think through it for themselves. So I think giving them the ability to say, right, okay, this is the problem, and then what do you think the diagnosis is? And I don't want people to freeze. I want people to sort of be able to come up with some ideas and be allowed to talk. And the more they talk, the more they'll see that something is ridiculous or ludicrous, and then that's fine. And then it comes clearer what the real problem is. So I think you've got to let people go off down several avenues, but say, right, you're drifting, you've been, or in a surgical procedure, it's easier, you've not been making any progress for the last 10 minutes. Why is that? Have you not been listening? So in surgery, I will talk always to the junior most member of the team, and that will be effectively telling the senior member of the team what they should be doing next if they've not, if they're not listening or watching or getting a bit lost. So I like to just try and encourage people to find their own way without letting them get lost.
Yeah. So that's
an
absence.
answer.
Well, no. Is it an absence of spoon feeding?
Yes.
So you're not one for let's get to the answer as soon as possible.
No.
Let's find our way to the answer.
Yeah.
I know what the answer is, but
Yeah. So I think if people think I can educate, then I hope it's in as much in the surgical skills as the decision making. I remember how frightened I was when I first became a consultant about my surgical skills, and I really do not want any of my trainees to feel that sense of fear. Now they will. I'm not stupid. They will have a sense of fear because suddenly when you're a consultant, it's your name and it's your patient.
Yeah.
If you bother to invest in that patient, it is your patient. It isn't just the X-ray, is it? It is your patient. And therefore you do need to feel invested in it, and therefore you should be a bit scared if you're operating on them, but not too bad, not too scared.
And you're a generalist. You're one of I wouldn't say one of the last generalists, but it is the generalist is a dying breed. I did your job, and I remember sitting in your clinic, seeing a cerebral palsy patient next to a DDH patient, next to a clubfoot patient, next to a worried parent. What is it? is that a job that's sustainable nowadays?
Sadly, I think probably not. And so you do have to move with the times, and I have to realise I'm an old fogey and things are going to be different. But I think, again, it's a recurring theme, and the old fogies get really criticised for this because we're living in the past and we're almost feels that our opinions are not worth it because we can't go back to those times. I'm not saying we should go back to those times, but I was well trained in the generality of surgery, and then I was well trained in the generality of trauma, then orthopaedics, and now pediatric orthopedics. And so I've come sort of circuitously round. So I think working at two of the best hospital for pediatric orthopedics, certainly within the UK. Did I ever plan that? No. But I feel that my career has equipped me to do that job well. And I like the fact that the registrars feel they never know what's coming next in my clinic. It was interesting you saying that about me years ago, but I think it's still the case. But my younger, therefore more junior, but only because they're younger colleagues, would rather be expert at one thing early on. So they see, I fear, they see things in terms of limb reconstruction techniques, or they see things in terms of the hip. And they know the hip's connected to the knee, connected to the foot, because that song says it is, but they're not always thinking as holistically as I would like them to. So I am really concerned that we become, even in pediatric orthopedics, become a bit too subspecialised, a bit too technical, or technicians, when in fact in the growing child, particularly I think in the pathologies we deal with, you have to have a bit of generalism. It's not right to the parents to say, oh, I don't know about that because it's not the hip. I don't know about why your child's got spasticity. Of course you do. You know, the child's got cerebral palsy, so you should know a bit about spasticity. You can't just look them in the eye and say, that's not my field.
But medicine in general is driving us that way, isn't it? We are being pushed down a bit more subspecialist lines. We all be, and I feel that as orthopaedic surgeons get older, they do tend to shrink their practice. In general, people tend to like narrow down, and yet there are a few who don't. There are some that say, no, I'm going to stay as broad as I've always been, and I'm not going to chop down. Maybe I'll shed that or shed that, but my emphasis on staying broad. And that's something you've definitely done.
Yes, and we may get onto this later, and of course the getting it right first time might encourage me to be more specialised.
Is there a time where a generalist has to have insight and say, this is not my expertise, I need to hand this off? And how difficult is that sometimes, or is it quite clear cut for you?
No, I do find that difficult, and I hope that I've got better as I got a bit older, because I realised that I was hiding behind this, oh, it was all right in my day. So I was then hiding that I could do this in my day, and I've done this. And then you realise that, yes, but you're no longer the best at doing that. And the Montgomery ruling sort of implies that you should really let so if I want to do it this way, because that's what I'm familiar with, I should also consider the other way or get a second opinion or whatever. But I believe in looking after the soft tissues, as most respected orthopaedic surgeons do, but I'm not a plastic surgeon. And therefore I should work closely with my plastic surgeons or colleagues in other fields. So I think, again, it's about making sure that you have the right relationships in place, because I think it is hard to pass something off to someone you don't know and or certainly don't respect. I'm never going to do that. So you need to know them, respect them, know that they may use the same phraseology as I've used. I think that's important, so that I say, we just need a bit of help with this. This isn't going quite perfectly. Let my friend help us out here. And not have the friend say, oh, for goodness sake, that's awful. I've never seen anything so bad in all my life.
Right. Agreed. Agreed. What's your favourite operation?
I think probably still putting a dislocated baby hip back in.
Right.
I feel, you probably know that I'm an advocate of improving our screening procedures, so we really shouldn't be doing that operation anymore, although there'll always be some of them
sneak through the net.
Well, actually, I hope they shouldn't sneak through the net, but they will not be treated by anything other than a surgical procedure. So we should know about all these hips within a few weeks of birth, but they may not all be treated conservatively. There will be some who need an operation, but we should know about them. They shouldn't limp in. With a Trendelenburg gait, which is great for teaching, but really, they should not be walking in age 3.
It should be an ancient thing, Yeah.
And then they say, they weren't born here, and you think, they were born around the corner, actually, so we should have picked that one up.
Deborah, so you were past president of EPOS, European Pediatric Orthopedic Society. What's it like being president? What do you do going to being a president of a big society like that?
I wish I knew. I mean, it was all a bit of a dream. I don't know quite how I ended up in that role. But obviously, I was in that role because people thought that I could perform well in that role. And perhaps I just wasn't brave enough to say, no, I don't think that's for me. So I ended up doing it and enjoying it. And I hope that I achieved some things when I was president.
What sort of leader are you? When you were thrust into that position, what's your mode of leadership, would you say?
Well, I think because I don't consider myself a natural leader. I've not read all the leadership manuals. Sometimes you go to meetings and people give their talks on leadership, and I've read this book and I've read that book and I'm quoting from this. I can't do any of that. But my first real experience of leadership of a big group, i.e. the European Pediatric Orthopedics Society, did remind me that you're working in Europe with a whole mix of personalities and different cultures, and you're all coming together to try and work for the good of a society or the good of the members and therefore the good of the patients. I was the only one in the room usually who could only speak one language well. Everyone else was multilingual, multi-talented. So I think my style of leadership had to be engaging and listening. And trying to sort of make sense of everything around me and then sort of coming to a consensus. So I think those are the facets that I learnt from managing a European situation from a position of, I was really proud to be president. I don't want you to think that I went into it totally with closed eyes, but I did not see myself in that role. But as it became obvious that others did, then I was very happy to take that role on, and I learnt a lot from that.
But you took a sort of collaborative, collegiate approach. Yeah. It's very easy to say what makes a good leader, and there's a very long list of things that make good leaders. But a lot of us, as you say, find ourselves in leadership positions, get thrust into them, maybe reluctantly, maybe unexpectedly. What, in your experience, when you've worked under people, what have you found are exasperatingly annoying traits of leaders? What are things that we should avoid doing? What are the things that make for a really bad leader, or that leaders undermine themselves by doing?
So one thing is staying in a position of power or leadership too long. So that's not a day-to-day problem, but I think that there needs to be an evolution of leadership. And that allows for an evolution of leadership styles as well. And that, I think, gets the best of a group of people. So I'm aware I've gone slightly off tack there, because the one thing that really annoys me is people just being talked over and not listened to. And you're asked to go and find something out and you present it, and then no one really listens. Now, I agree the leader has to make the decisions, has to, I hope, listen to everything, and then maybe they're going to go the way they wanted to go anyway. But there should be at least a semblance of appearing to listen and to take on board what people have presented to you.
Yeah. I guess one of the things, the other side, the flip side of that is that if you have a leadership which rotates every year, which actually most these big bodies do, by rotate, it can become a little bit processional, and so it's like gadunk, and then it's going to be him, and then it's going to be her, then it's going to be him, it's going to be her, and it lacks a little bit of vitality and edge, maybe.
So do I think that the presidents of some of these associations, should they be a 2-year stint? I actually think that might be reasonable. I think people get round it by saying, if you're in the presidential line for these 3-4 years, this aspect of the job is going to be yours.
Yes.
So,
right.
For example, in the BOA, John Skinner is going to be president next year, but he's going to be the representative on the Royal College of Surgeons throughout his presidential term. So that will be 4 years that he will, presidential line. So for 4 years, he will be representing our orthopaedic interests
in different aspects. So by the time you hit presidents, actually, you're fully embedded in the organisation.
Yes.
You have a very clear idea of what.
So I think that goes some way to mitigate the problems of just going 1 year. And I think there is a tendency for leaders to want to achieve, tick another box in their leadership. What can I achieve? I'm going to say a bit like some managers in the NHS, I'm only here for a short while, but I have to achieve a change, or I have to do something, implement something.
Yeah.
Whether it works or not is a different matter, and then I'm leaving. Now, I'm not meaning to say that that's the truth of all managers, but it's the truth of inherently a little bit true of every one of us. We want to do well in this podcast, so
we want to achieve.
We want to achieve. We are achievers, but we have to not do it at the expense of others, and certainly not at the expense of the association we're supposed to be leading. I think that's a real issue. Yeah.
So we're on the BOA. Just give us an idea of the structure of the BOA. Just draw the tree for me. You got the president, and then what happens after that?
Yes, the president's way at the top. No.
Yeah.
So it is quite a pyramid, a conical tree up at the top. So the president, then there's an executive, which is only 5 of us. Although over the latter 2 years, because we've been busy, we've extended it because the rules allow us. So there are 6 of us. But that's a very small, coherent group, of 6. Then below that, there are 13 or so extra members of council, the trustees, who are elected by our membership. And then there's a few invited members, which would take the whole council up to 31.
Right.
And then we've got subcommittees, orthopaedic committee, the trauma committee, the research committee, education committee. But those are deliberately small committees so that they function well.
Yes.
And then we're supposed to have our I'm not meaning to be cynical, I think it's a good idea. We have lots of short life working groups to try and bring in more people with a defined project. So a start and a finish, and then that's it. And then you can go on and do other things. But it's a way of trying to get more people engaged in a doable project so that they can see that they've achieved something. Again, that's that achieving things. But also, this isn't a commitment that I've got to give up, so many hours per week or so many days per month for the foreseeable future. This is quick Zoom calls these days, certainly. A little bit of a project. We need to get it done. And then back to the day job.
So what is the role of the BOA in your eyes?
Well, I think it can be difficult to define, and it is something that exercises the BOA more now than it perhaps did. I think it realises it's not there by right, that it has to prove to its membership what its role is. And I think that can be difficult, given all those restrictions that you've just mentioned. But our strapline is caring for patients and supporting surgeons, and I think that is what we do. Orthopaedic surgeons have had a difficult year. Our patients have had a horrendous year.
Agreed.
And I don't think anyone else represents our surgeons and our patients the way that the BOA can. Have we got access to the parliamentary groups that we wanted to? No, we got down at the bottom of the list. We were called to give evidence, but somehow we didn't have time to hear from us. We are working with the Royal Colleges, but it's taken a while. We had an hour or so meeting yesterday with the orthopaedic directors, so quite a widespread group with the President of the Royal College of Surgeons of England and of Edinburgh, so that we could really explain what our concerns are, not only for us, but for our patients. So I think lobbying for patients and for surgeons is really important. And I think we have to lobby for our junior surgeons, our trainees as well. And that can seem like nothing, but I think it's hugely important.
Do you think we're good at that? Because I get the feeling sometimes that we think that because we're orthopaedic surgeons, because we can fix bones, and because we went to medical school, we must be pretty good at pretty much anything. So we can do the lobbying thing as well.
No,
do we? Surely we do not have expertise in a lot of these things. Do the BOA get involved with getting professional lobbyists to help with this stuff?
Not yet. But it may be that we are going to have to go down that route. When I say have to, if we want to do what we want to do, we may have to go down that route. Or we have to work much more closely with ARMA or with Versus Arthritis, who are better at this.
Yes.
It hurts me that we talk about at every meeting about patient representation, and yet we seem to be unable to find a really right patient, to come and represent orthopaedic views. I mean, we all know hundreds of patients, and yet none of us can seem to
rustle up the
one or two or three or half a dozen for a patient panel. But that's what other groups are good at. So I think that we have to look at musculoskeletal health in its entirety, be unafraid of working with others in order to help our patients.
But I think most orthopaedic surgeons, and probably surgeons in general, feel that the BOA and the Royal College of Surgeons do not have a disproportionately low amount of power when it comes to influencing government, compared with, say, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, deep VTE, these kind of buzz topics which hit people, and now hospital safety. But actually, these people waiting in agony on waiting lists for 12, 18 months. I mean, I know it's worse now than it used to be, but that doesn't. That idea of people really growing quite unwell and disabled in the community, waiting for a musculoskeletal operation, it doesn't really, we don't feel like that is hitting home.
No, and again, that's something that we're forever talking about now. We're trying, we used the word elective, and that was really the wrong word, wasn't it? We've got thousands on our elective waiting list. They're going to be reporting 104-week waiters in January in the new year, just get the Christmas period over and done with. And then we're going to be having to report people who've been waiting 104 weeks in a civilized country for orthopaedic musculoskeletal care. I mean, that's terrible. Yeah. So and this is not elective work. This is surgery that needs to be done. We're not really, planned is not a nice word either, because that means it's planning for a way in the future. But these are patients who deserve an operation soon. Yeah. Maybe not today or tomorrow, because we've got busy lives. So if they've got a son's wedding to go to, then they can get that wedding over and done with, and then we can fix their hip. We have not got our message across that people on the waiting lists are deteriorating. Yeah. And we have not got that message across that when you finally get your operation, you are worse now, you were worse than when you went on the waiting list, and you may not recover as much. Your end recovery may not be as high as it would have been on day one.
Exactly. And we now have evidence that if you wait over 6-12 months on a waiting list, your outcome is worse than if you got it done at the start.
And I think even in this lockdown period, if you've looked around your neighbourhood, the people are on their 1 hourly sort of spot of exercise around me, they have diminished, I think, some of them over this lockdown period. They're frailer than they were. They're less secure in what they're doing. They've just not been out of their house. And that sort of added healthcare burden is unrecognised.
But when you're lobbying government and trying to have political influence, sometimes we're so obsessed with being evidence-based, aren't we? But actually, appealing to the Daily Mail reader might be, and that's something that professional groups who say, you doctors, that's fine. Well, you take your evidence and you can keep that. Actually, the real message here, the one that's going to hit home, is actually something much more personal and things that people can relate to. And I wonder whether that's where we should be heading.
And when we did get a little bit of a voice at one of the parliamentary group meetings, the MP in charge said, well, what you need to do is get your patients to write an old-fashioned letter to the MP. That's what works. Sending emails or doing the surveys isn't really, what really works is virtually a handwritten letter, love and kisses in agony of, West Midlands or whatever. So again, I'm not meaning to be flippant about that letter writing style, but you've just got to get your message across on an individual basis for people to start understanding. But that's really sad that we have to do that. Well, no, maybe it's not. Maybe we should do that. But there's also the volume, the true volume of people who are waiting. That has to be taken into account as well. It isn't just Auntie Annie from Scarborough or whatever. There are hundreds, thousands.
In advance of this interview, I wanted to talk to a bunch of people and find out what the average Joe thinks about the BOA. And a lot of the sentiment I got from just talking to people around the subject was that the BOA doesn't feel particularly personal to them. They pay their license fee every year, but they don't feel they get a great deal more back from that, other than the annual congress, which we go to for free, the JTO, and some guidance documents like boast guidance and some clinical and some stuff over COVID, which was of course was extremely helpful and timely. And yet, when I speak to people who are on subcommittees and I look at who's on these subcommittees that you've just described and on that council, although the public perception is that these people may be, what did you describe, what was the word? Male, pale and stale.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that.
I could say, because I'm headed in that direction, right? These old white men, all with massive beards, look like Father Christmas, and they are all sitting around like professional committee members. That's not what it looks like, is it?
No.
Most of these committees are actually, those people are there, but they're in a minority. Most of these people that you look on the subcommittees, you think, those are the people I want. I look at my own subcommittee, which would be the trauma one. It's a very diverse group. It's got ethnicity, gender, geography, all well described within it. And actually its output is quite prolific. So I think maybe there's a public perception issue going on with what people are actually getting in comparison. What you don't know what you don't know.
Yes, I think that's right. And you see what you see, or you see what you want to see. And it's become, I think, a little too fashionable to knock those who have been appointed by their peers to do a job. And they are doing the job well. And it's not their particular fault as individuals that they are not representative of the diversity of the population that they're treating. They are representative of the age group of people, or they are more representative of the age group of their colleagues who are applying for these jobs. So I think it's going to be difficult to change everything overnight. The council was not very diverse last year. The year before it was better. Last year was bad. This year it's getting better again. So everything goes in slight cycles. Yeah. I think the BOA is working hard to change the reality, but also to change the perception, so that we have our diversity and inclusion strategies and plans and aims and missions to, change the status quo, to be much more diverse culturally in everything that we do. And that isn't just a mouthpiece, that is happening. And I'm glad that the people who are working on the committee structures feel that that is more diverse in all the characteristics that we're looking for. And this year it has filtered through to council, and it will filter through. And sadly, we can't change everything overnight. So we need better engagement in the BOA. So simply changing from a postal system to the online voting system that increased our engagement from only 15% of our people voted last year to 40% voted this year. I mean, still not great, but it's way better. Significantly better.
And I don't want to go into a cheesy discussion around COVID and Zoom meetings, but it has brought about a lot of good has come from it, hasn't it?
And we had to have, we had photos and things online so that you knew a little bit more about who you were voting for. And simple things like we're making it more that your proposer has to actually say just a sentence or two about you. They have to actually be engaged in supporting you as a member.
When you're driving, you have a body and you want it to be more diverse. You don't dislike any of the people on it because they're all good guys, but you don't want it to be quite so white male dominated. Yeah. And you want to make it more inclusive. Can you force inclusivity? Can you say we're going to have 5 positions here? 3 of them absolutely have to be female, and 3 of them absolutely have to be black ethnic minority. Personally, don't feel we should go down that route. But then some people would say that's because I'm already there, so I'm not going to vote to change things for other people, and that you shouldn't ask me about these sorts of things because I've made it, quote unquote. So I obviously think it was easy and it wasn't a problem, and I've just got on with it and done it, and everyone else should just get on with it and do it. But I think that we have to increase our involvement and our engagement, and I keep using that word engagement, so that we now need to have, and we do have now, a broader voting pool. So we've increased the people who can vote from just being consultants to being SAS doctors of more than 10 years standing and trainees of more than 10 years standing. You've devoted 10 years of your career to orthopaedics, so it's post-CCT for the trainees and the more established SAS doctors, so they are now voting members in the association. So you're hoping that in itself will bring around that diversity and inclusivity.
Now the next thing is that they can't stand for election necessarily, but they can vote. So that I'm hoping that will help bring about some more change. So
I guess the critic would say if anyone could force it, it could be you. You'd be a good person to do that because people would follow that and would think if Deborah says that, then that's what he's doing.
Yes, and so I may be a little bit belatedly accepting the role that I have in trying to bring about change, which isn't happening fast enough. I think slightly in my defence, I spent a lot of my clinical career and my leadership career and my involvement career with committees and everything in the paediatric world, where we are 40% women.
Yeah.
There are women everywhere. There are ethnic diversity everywhere, because I've been working in European or North American or international meetings. So I've had my head in the sand about
Yes.
what was happening at home. And I look at some of our specialist societies. They are not good. And the BOA has not been good. And so I've been tending to maybe sit on the sidelines or be a bit quiet about it and just wait for change to happen.
Yeah.
But I think the youngsters are right. I don't mean that in any disrespectful way. They are right. We're not moving fast enough.
Yeah.
And I think it is changing, but maybe not quick enough.
Yeah.
But if I hear one more time that only 6% of trauma and orthopaedic consultants are women, I will get quite cross, because it is true overall. But 30% of that group are within 5 years of CCT. So they're young consultants.
Right.
And we are a lot of membership. So having a few more women every year is not going to, it's going to take a while to change
come through.
percentages.
Yeah.
But sort of in some regions, 25% of trainees on a training program are women.
Yeah.
There is no evidence to suggest that they're going to not get a consultant job
Yeah.
at the end of it. So if 25% of our trainees are women, in a few years' time, they will be consultants.
Yeah.
Won't make it 25% of consultants are women, but it will change. So
Yes.
things are changing, both in the gender diversity in as a workforce, and certainly in the ethnicity as well. Again, the figures at CT2 level, core training level, and at specialist training level at the moment say that 30%-ish in both groups are Asian or British Asian by ethnic origin.
Yeah.
And in the core trainees, that's the biggest group. So that's the Health Education England stat. So at one level, the diversity in our cohort of orthopaedic surgeons and orthopaedic surgeons to be, it is changing to match the population we treat better.
Yeah.
We're not there yet, and I can see that people are going to go mad on social media saying she doesn't know about anything, and it's really bad out there, and we must do better. We must do better, but we are improving. Not
Yeah.
we, but we are improving.
Yeah, the landscape's getting
The
better.
landscape is changing. We just have to make sure it carries on doing that and can do it even better.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah. Deborah, on the subject of GIRFT, do you feel that it's as fun being an orthopaedic surgeon these days, now that we're being tunneled down a subspecialist route much more early, and we're being told by Tim Briggs that we can only do like 4 or 5 operations, or we have to restrict our practice in order to get sufficient numbers to be deemed competent? Do you think it's making it less fun?
Potentially, yes. But I think that we do need to be very much aware of what we're doing and the outcomes of what we're doing. And so we can't just do stuff for fun if we don't know what our outcomes are. So I think that one of the beauties about the GIRFT process has been to encourage us to know what we're doing, and to make sure that what I do is on the equivalent group of patients is the same as one of my colleagues might be doing in Alderhay or in the Bristol Children's Hospital or something like that. So I had high hopes of the GIRFT process in paediatric orthopedics to try and show us some of the variability in practice and try and encourage us to collect data like the NJR has collected data. All my career, we've been saying, we can't judge outcomes in children. You need to wait to skeletal maturity. They cope very well. We don't need to worry about them. They'll be fine. And although that attitude has changed, if we had been collecting outcomes data at the start of my career, we would be 15 years into it. And we would know a lot more about what works and what doesn't work. And, of course, it may work better in one centre than the other, but it would, again, what I see is that maybe my way of treating a DDH is better or worse than someone else's method of DDH. And now I can look at the data and understand the data and then decide whether I should give it up, change what I do, a bit like cement, well, not at all, but a bit like cemented, uncemented hip replacement debate. Do I change? Do I go through another learning curve? Is it really just tweaking what I do, and accepting that what I've known for a while didn't seem to be working quite as well as I wanted it to. And maybe, I need something to just kick me and say, look, Deborah, enough's enough, change.
Yeah. Deborah, I wanted to ask you about mentors in general. Mentors as you get older. So you have and I think a lot of us don't necessarily say, right, I need to go and find a mentor, and you go out and you find one, and then these things happen organically, usually. So as you get older, these career advancements become much less frequent, and so your need for a mentor doesn't feel as important. I mean, do you have a mentor, would you say?
So you asked me that, a week or two ago, and I said no, I didn't really think I had, and I'm changing my mind about that, and it made me realise that one of my many discussions with Claire Marks, who of course is a friend, and who's, some people would say my career is following hers, although I'm no intention of doing most of the work that she's taken on. But she felt in a vulnerable position as president of the Royal College of Surgeons, and had a group of the different presidents of the different colleges, obs and gynae, or the psychiatrists, or any of the groups, just as this is a group of us who are all at the same level, and we could maybe mentor or help each other with the difficulties that we're finding in being part of our associations. So she did that, and I know that other colleagues of mine who are women in leadership roles in the States do other sorts of things and have actually had professional...
Right, coaches.
Yeah, coaching.
Yeah, and do you ever feel the need for a coach? I mean, maybe we don't feel the need for a coach, but do you think you might be better if you had one?
Well, I think I don't feel the need for one because I'm frightened that it might reveal my deficiencies more than I know them myself. So maybe I'm frightened of it, but that's exactly why maybe I should. But I was also thinking that I may not have the mentor as I used to define it, or as I define it for maybe my trainees or junior colleagues. But my junior colleagues do pull me up if they think I'm misbehaving. And I have colleagues, for example, in the BOA, who I can ring and say, this is tricky, or how do we negotiate this, or how do you think I should handle this? So I think I do have mentors, but they're different, and they fulfill different roles. And the people I call my mentors are, of course, long retired, and they're my fathers or my grandfathers now, and really they do mentor me, but not... Yeah.
But now you have trusted people to whom you go for specific elements of advice.
But when Mr. Cattrall says, well done, dear, I still think that's good. It's good enough for me.
Deborah, you're on council and management of the BJJ, Bone and Joint Journal, and you have published all of your life. You've been doing peer review stuff all your life, and your back catalogue must be awesome. I have not looked up what it is, but it must be pretty righteous.
Which is a gun approach.
Yeah, and it is. You've done a huge. I mean, it kind of reflects your practice. But back in the day, before you honed down into paediatrics, you were actually much more into the trauma side of stuff. So you did a lot of calcaneal fractures with Roger Atkins. What's the stuff that you're most proud of now? If you had to stand before God and say, right, these are the publications that I'm most proud of, or the things that I felt changed practice most, what would those be? So
there'll be, I'm going to have to come out with two. What really turned me on to research, I suppose, is going to work with Roger Atkins. And I arrived as a brand new senior registrar in a city I didn't know, in a system I didn't know. And he'd only arrived there as a senior lecturer a few months before me. So I was there keen and eager to please, and we'd had a calcaneal fracture come in, and I asked him a question, and he said, I don't know, find out. So I thought, oh, for goodness sake. So this is still back in the day when you had to go to the library, so I spent all night in the library trying to find out
what the answer was.
Got back the next morning and didn't mention it. So I thought, by the end of the day, I said, Mr. Atkins, I looked that up and I can't find the answer, so what is the answer?
What is the answer?
He said, no, I said, find out. It's called research. We're going to have to do a research project to find out the answer to your question. And I looked at him, light bulb moment. Yeah. Oh, I see.
Okay.
So
you have a question and then you answer
it. Yes. So I always remember that, because that did spark my interest in questions. And so Why?
And is that honestly what you do now? Do you all the papers you produce and end up writing start in a question, do they?
Yes, they do. And one of the reasons why it is a bit of a scattergun approach is because if someone has an idea, I say, well, okay, let's give it a go. My papers are not world-shattering, but it's because someone has an idea, we find out something, and I contribute to the wealth of papers which perhaps shouldn't be published. Is there a real message in all of the papers I've written? I've tried to maintain a standard that there is a message in everything I've written, even if it's small, but that it's clinically relevant and that it might help some patient and some surgeon somewhere.
Yeah. But research is changing in that respect, isn't it? So Deborah, other than orthopaedics, what do you do for fun?
Story of my life, a bit of everything. So you called me a generalist in my work, I'm probably a generalist in my social life as well. I would have to say eating and drinking is one of my hobbies.
Of course, it's in there.
Yeah, not on my own particularly, I like to do that with friends. And I love London life, so I like to make the most of it to a certain extent, in all its cultural stuff. So I like a bit of plays, I like some concerts, some music, some art, that sort of thing. I love my sport. I don't play much sport these days, but I love going to visit, sporting venues and being a spectator.
Seeing stuff.
Nice, yeah.
And how do you judge the work-life balance thing? Do you think you've got it about right?
No, I'm sure I haven't, and my friends would say I haven't. But I do truly enjoy my work, and I do try and curtail it because it could take up every minute of the working day, and that's no fun. So I think my work-life balance goes, up and down like a yo-yo really. Sometimes it's out of control, sometimes it's better, and I've stopped angsting about it too much. I am who I am. I am aware that I maybe work too hard and don't play hard enough, but I'm not going to beat myself up about it. It is what it is, yeah. I seem to be thriving on it, so that's okay.
Great. Deborah, thank you so much for coming in today. Very, very grateful. You've been terrific. Thank you.
My pleasure, and I'm sorry I couldn't think of a good leader.